Okay, let's see. Late night stream, let's go. Had to do it, had to get it done, had to do it tonight. Alright, let's see. Okay, episode 6. This one is where we go a lot deeper. We're about to really peel the layers off the onion, if you will. And oh dude, it's super late. Yeah. Honestly, it's actually good, the timing for this one, now that I think about it, because this one it's very easy to spirate off into tangents and like non-related topics and stuff with what we're gonna get into, and it's very layered, so I'm gonna try and give the introductory level synopses, but yeah, it's not like there's a role model you can really point to. If that makes sense. Like, you know how it'll be like, oh, there's a path in front of you, oh, you can go this way, or like you can observe others who have done topics before. No one does what we're about to cover. So yeah. No, yeah, to be honest, I didn't even plan to spark up tonight. I'm about to leave town. I'm about to go on a vacation, so I was like, you know what, might as well. Give it like another minute or so, and then we'll really get started. Okay, give me 1 second. Yeah, give me 1 second. Alright, y'all ready? Let me turn the music down just a little bit. Yeah, this is the one you're probably gonna be watching the rerun because literally no one's awake right now. But this is the one. This is the one y'all have all been like spamming me, hitting me up about. It's finally here. We're finally doing it. And you can kind of tell, like, with me starting out, why I'm kind of unsure of how even right now as I'm about to do it, how I even want to go about it. And it's partially because the hype built up. Like, I know a lot of you have been asking for translation specifics, like how translation works, to really get into it, but it's one of those things that, yeah, like I was saying earlier, people don't really talk about, but I'm gonna try the best I can to like normify it, not too much, but enough so, you know, the general person who's not involved with these types of things can still relate. But yeah, we'll go ahead and start up right now. So the episode, we're calling it Translation Technai. Now, Technai is the plural form of the Greek word techni. Techni is, at its translation definition sense, it just means like someone's art, someone's craft, your skill, your trade. Now, what's interesting, and I didn't put this in the notes, but I'll just throw it out there. When we read in the New Testament, for example, that that Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, is a carpenter. Well, the Greek word there is techni, which can mean carpenter, but does not necessarily mean carpenter. So it is, in fact, in English translations, an interpretive conclusion or an interpretive leap when we render techni as carpenter, because at its base, what it means is art, craft, skill, or trade. And you have, like, Xylon would represent wood in Greek, or things pertaining to wood would incorporate a form of this word. But techni by itself does not necessarily denote carpentry. But again, techni, plural, so arts, crafts, skills, trades. And then when you look at our English language today, it's used quite a bit. So you have technique, technology, technical, technicality. Think of all the words with techni in them. It's still part of, or it's ported into and remains in our English use today. So I'm going to start now with an allegorical story. I'm going to give an allegory here for the silent but all-pervading power that a translator constantly holds in his role, especially at a high level. So in this allegory, let's say, and again, it's an allegory, it's a hypothetical. So in this story, America's invading Mongolia. The American president and his trusted translator approach the captured Mongolian ruler. The president turns to his translator and says, "Order him to reveal where he's hidden his nation's gold reserves, or we will kill him and his family." Translator hears this from the president, turns to the Mongolian ruler and says, the president in Mongolian, translating the president's English, he says, "The president demands that you reveal where you've hidden your nation's gold reserves, or he will kill you and your family." Exactly as the president said to the translator. Now the ruler turns to the translator and says, "I buried it all underneath my private domicile. It's all buried underneath my house." The translator now turns back to the president and he says to go ahead and kill him. Okay, so this demonstrates or kind of illustrates the nuance of the degree of power and freedom, liberty, if you will, that a translator is able to take with their work and with their doings. Now, English as receiving and having translations done from other languages really begins in the current chronology that we're given. Really, like, there's a few you can point to in the 1500s and like one or two prior, but really it's like a mainstream thing where things are becoming translated into English, really picking up in where they place to the 1600s. So then onward, it's the literature's more pervasive, it's more numerous. And we just have a few quotes here by, we go through the aeons to centuries, some English translators. So, the first quote here, and again, we're just trying to understand the generic or basic level, foundational level meaning of what we're even doing, what's even the essence or the nature of a translator's work, the art, the technique of a translator, and what it means to make a translation. So here's a quote. It seems to me that the true reason why we have so few translation versions that are tolerable is because there are so few who have all the talents requisite for translation, and that there is so little praise and so small encouragement for so considerable a part of learning. And this is in John Dryden's English translation, or English translational preface to Ovid's epistles, which were originally, of course, written in Latin. So here we have another quote. And this is now jumping ahead about a century. I would therefore describe a good translation to be that in which the merit of the original work is so completely transfused into another language as to be distinctly apprehended and as strongly felt by a native of the country to which that language belongs, as it is by those who speak the language of the original work. And this is by Alexander Fraser Tytler. Then we jump ahead another century or two, and we've got a translator's quote here once again. So this is now 1923, and we have, "It is the task of the translator to release in his own language that pure language which is under the spell of another, to liberate the language imprisoned in a work in his recreation of that work. For the sake of pure language, he breaks through decayed barriers of his own language." And that's a pretty big one that I will want to emphasize here, because he articulates, even if it seems at its surface like kind of loaded language or kind of confusing, he puts it very well in his essay, what is literally called The Task of the Translator. And then we jump to modernity, modern era, modern times. Here we have 2020, and quote, "It is hard to produce a good literary translation. This is certainly true of translations of ancient Greek and Roman texts, but it is also true of literary translation in general. It is very difficult. Most readers of foreign languages are not translators. Most writers are not translators. Translators have to read and write at the same time, as if always playing multiple instruments in a one-person band, and most one-person bands do not sound very good." And this is a contemporary, a current professor and translator of Greek and Latin classical literature at UPenn, Emily Wilson. So, if the quotes were confusing or you found them wanting, or you can go back and re-listen, especially if you're watching the rerun. We're just gonna jump through here. I've got an announcement I'm gonna make here shortly, but first I'm going to preface said announcement by bringing up an example of modernity's problem with translations. We've got a big problem. Houston, we have a problem. And we're going to demonstrate it with this example. This example demonstrates and articulates, it basically gives a summary of what we're faced with as English speakers living in Anglodom, as I would call it, which is really just the English-speaking world. If English is a dominant language where you live under what would generically just be called Anglodom. And so let's say I want to read Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher. Well, there's about a half dozen or so English translations to pick from throughout the ages, starting in like the mid 1800s up through to today. Well, the most popular one and the best-selling modern translation is this one right here by Brooks Haxton, done in 2003, published through Penguin Classics out of London, England. And we're going to take a look here at how this translation is. We're going to approach it with the mind of a translator and see what he's doing. So let's look at his fragment 89. Now, first off, he doesn't even follow, and this isn't a jab against him, he doesn't even follow the traditional numbering system that's been modernized for the fragments, the collection of the fragments. But this is really a non sequitur. This is not important. So in his fragment 89, it's a pulling of a Latin statement written about Heraclitus, or attributed to originally being a Greek saying of Heraclitus. Now, the Latin, you can see at the very top, is one sentence, and when we do a one-to-one mapping, when we, in the hyper-literal sense, as if we were drawing lines between words, if we hyper-literally translate what this Latin says, you get what is in the middle bullet point here. And all it is, and exactly what it's saying, if we map it to English, is from a man in 30 years, or within 30 years, a grandfather can be had, or a grandfather may be had. That is, in the most literal sense, what the Latin is saying when we one-to-one map to English. Now let's look at what the top-selling, most popular English version of Heraclitus says for this fragment in Haxton's translation. Look, the baby born, under the new moon, under the old moon holds her grandchild in her arms. Now, compare in red what is officially Haxton's translation for this fragment with the literal what the Latin is literally saying. This is what you would call, rightfully, fabrication. Okay, this is forging the text. This is not a translation, by definition, by any means. Yet, this is the top-selling English rendering for this fragment, currently right now as I'm making this. And people don't second guess this. People don't really think about this. People don't question this. They buy a translation in English of a work not originally composed in English, and they imagine, or without thinking about it even, most of the time not even thinking about it, that the translator knows what they're doing and is just going to give a perfected one-to-one mapping of whatever the original text, original language is saying. Here's a clear indication that that is not the case. And not only is it not the case in the past, it's not the case right now, in the present, contemporary. So here we've got some pictures of the translator, and for those of you who think I'm trolling, well, I'm not trolling. Okay, on the right is the paperback cover. If you search up Heraclitus fragments, number 1 on Amazon, this will come up. Number 1 pretty much on Google, page 1, this will come up. And then here we have somebody on that page showing you the Latin fragment 89 and the translation. Okay, so I'm not exaggerating nor making this up. And this is what we're working with. This is what we're dealing with. Freaks like this who are just making shit up and fabricating what these people prior to us, and especially like historical figures, important figures prior to us, actually said. But it doesn't end here. It doesn't end there. So we have to consider, being that this is manifest and that this is a phenomena that is real and we're seeing it right now, what are then the implications? What comes of this reality, or this being a reality? Well, I've got another hypothetical here to give an illustration of the potential outcome, the potential effects. So another hypothetical example, say I'm an expert astronomer at MIT or Cornell or Harvard or what have you, a prestigious institution with a very high reputation that's very much trusted as a source or as an authority in the current Anglo world, English-speaking world. Now, me as an expert astronomer with a career at one of these Ivy League universities, say I go to write a paper, or I go to write a dissertation, or write a book about what is a contemporary important subject or important material ongoing right now in the field of astronomy. Say I get to talking about the moon, and I want to make a citation. And by the way, me as an expert astronomer, I have PhD at the end of my name, or I have doctor as a title in my name in this hypothetical. Just bear that in mind. So when you see me as the author in this hypothetical, it's doctor or PhD at the end, okay? Now, I don't have a background as an astronomer at one of these Ivy Leagues. I have no background in linguistics. I don't speak or know the Greek language. I do astronomy. I look at planets and astrological things, and I'm really good in mathematics and things of this sort. I'm not sitting around learning languages. This is not connected to astronomy at all. So when I go to make a citation of a non-English originating work in my astronomical paper or book or dissertation, well, I'm going to, let's say for the sake of the hypothetical, I'm going to make a citation where there's the Greeks attributing significance to the moon with childbirth, like we have in the last slide, Haxton's translation, where he fabricates the text. But I come across this, me being a modern astronomer, not knowing any better, trusting the translator, and then it would look like this. It would in the end come out exactly like this quote here. So in my book, as a PhD or doctor, I would say the moon was evidently interconnected with childbirth in the eyes of Heraclitus, and then follows the quote: "Look, the baby born under the new moon, under the old moon holds her grandchild in her arms." And then would follow a footnote or a citation that I would give to this edition, which is, as we've covered, the top selling, most circulating English translation edition of Heraclitus' fragments right now. Yet, in so doing, say a whole bunch of people read my work and a whole bunch of people accept or embrace my work, yet this quote doesn't exist. Okay, what we have is an Angloid scribe, Brooks Haxton, at Syracuse University in New York, fabricating this quote in 2003, falsely attributing it to Heraclitus, post facto or after the fact, retrojecting words onto this philosopher that he did not say, nor the Latin quotation who's referencing him, nor did that say. Yet this now circulates in our paradigm, in our civilization, in our contemporary aeon, in our age, as if this is what he said. And this is the game that's being played en masse. So the announcement that follows, and to call back to when I said, I'm going to make an announcement, the reason I'm using this example is because I'm going to be releasing my first book publication, being a translation done by myself personally of Heraclitus' fragments. And it's going to come with a Greek and Latin to English parallel with footnotes, commentary, and explanatory notes. And all of this is going to go in depth on the subject. Now, this is going to be in the future. This is not like tomorrow or next week. There's still things to work out. I'm still revising it, and I've still got to sort some stuff out with it. But in the near future, be on the lookout for this, and I'll be giving updates as this really gets closer and closer to when it's actually going to release. But I do want to make you guys aware of this, that this is coming and it's on the way. And yeah, but with this all being said, in this example we're looking at, it's pretty logical to think to yourself, like, obviously it doesn't end nor just begin here. Hold on, let me get a song I want to hear. Let's see. And let me turn it down a little bit. Oh, shit. Oops. Damn it. Okay, there we go. I was trying to turn the music down, and then, yeah. Okay. So the question becomes, like Morpheus in the Matrix, how far do you think the rabbit hole goes? Does it start and end with Heraclitus? Is it just Greek philosophy? Is it just a few bad actors in Oxford University or Syracuse in New York? Or does it run further than this? Is it worse? And to skip like the hula hoops, to skip the gesturing and building up to where it gets the worst, we're just going to jump right to the apex of the pyramid when it comes to translations and work of translators. So that is literally the Bible. The Bible is the final boss of translations, and it's the final boss for translators. And that's because where we stand and as we are right now, the Bible's books are the most translated in the world. Currently, it's posted to be translated in 4,007 languages, with 2,574 languages at least translating the New Testament. So it is literally the most translated corpus or body of literature of all time, of mankind, known to man. And of these translations, of these disseminated Bibles, the apex within this apex of all translations, the apex of all Bible translations, is the King James Authorized English Translation. Now, this was done by the British Crown, the King of the British Empire, King James I, and the initial first version of this came out in 1611. Now, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, there's currently, as of 2021, between 5 and 7 million copies that have been on record sold of specifically the King James Bible translation. So we hear all that, we take all that in, with everything we just looked at with contemporary translating, just those examples. And we have to ask the question, or we should ask the question, is because on the one hand, like if you're a Christian, on the one hand, you might think to yourself, if you're a Christian, if this matters to you, you would say, oh, well, that's great. Everyone should be able to read the Bible, right? That's awesome. It's 5 to 7 million copies. That means it's everywhere. Well, yeah, sure. Like, I understand the intention. I'm not saying no, people shouldn't have access to the Bible. But we still have to ask the question, is this a good or a bad thing? Because who are the translators that are in charge of 5 to 7 million copies of the Bible disseminating throughout the world? What are their views? What are their religious values? And we have an image here. This is a copy, one of them, of the Freemasonic Bible. So for those of you that don't know, in Freemasonry, there's only one Bible that is authoritatively canonized or allowed to be brought into and read aloud in the Masonic Temple, in the Masonic Lodge, and that is specifically and solely the King James Version, authorized version, English Bible, which is a curious thing. Absolutely. So when we inquire into this and we conduct a historia. We do an investigation into the King James Bible. Well, what is the surface level finding? Well, first we know it's the world's top selling translation of all time, and it's the top selling translation of all the most ever translated books of all time as well. Yet, with this, ironically or unironically enough, what we find is we actually don't even know who all the translators are that had a hand in translating it. So, the King James Version, the KJV translation, we couldn't even ascertain, we don't even know who all played a role under the British Crown, under King James I, in making the translation. We have a list we can pull up and some that we know definitively, but we can also definitively say we don't know all these other translators involved. So it's strange. The most translated version and the most disseminated translation of the most translated popular books, we don't even know who's behind them from the 1600s. So with this, we have to couple in another piece of the puzzle to kind of try and make sense of the current state of affairs in Anglo society. So in Anglodom, there are between, and this is an estimate, the range can vary, but there's between 35,000 to 40,000 plus known, publicly declared, like espoused Christian denominations. With this, there's currently between 900 to 1,000 English Bible translations or English Bible versions. And that is to say, there's between 900 to 1,000 different readings or different versions of the same books, the same Bible, collection of books that make the Bible, rendered into modern English. There's between 900 and 1,000 different ways you can read in English what is the same original text of these books. And when you mesh two and two together, it's actually no wonder there's so many denominations in English speaking society. Okay, this is what we would call this level of incongruency we would call schizophrenic. Okay, 900 to 1,000 ways you could read any set of particular verses or passages of the same book. And we're wondering why there's 35 to 40,000 plus different versions of what people are calling Christianity. Well, the unspoken subject and what has not been covered really at all is this fact right here on this slide. And I have these charts here in the bottom right. This is more of a meme. This isn't, I mean, it's not even legible, but that's really by design. Look how ridiculous this looks. Like, this is a meme. This is crazy. But anyway, for continuing the delve into the KJV, along with all this, many people also don't know that the KJV authorized English translation actually serves as the basis or the original text for translating KJV Bibles into other or receiving languages. So, in other words, non-English languages in non-English speaking primary nations who adopt or receive a KJV version of the Bible, well, in many instances and for many languages, they actually will take the English KJV translation and, working off of this English translation, conduct a translation of the English into the receiving language. So an example or a hypothetical of this would be let's say I'm from Guyana. Okay, I'm in South America, and or I guess let's be more relatable. Let's say I'm in Mexico. Okay, in Mexico, I would speak Spanish as a primary tongue, a primary language. And let's say I'm the leader of Mexico. Well, I say, okay, we want a Bible and we're going to try and get a translation of the KJV. Rather than the translators working from the actual Bible itself, the the manuscripts, whatever tradition, whether it's the Hebraic or the Greek, is not even the point here. But original manuscripts, no. They take the English translated manuscripts and translate the English into the recipient language. So it really calls into question, once these KJV translations become disseminated into other languages, spanning the world really, can you even call that a Bible anymore? Is this even, to what extent can we even classify that as still being authentically the Bible? So continuing, I mean, many people don't know a lot of things about the KJV, yet it's as we've said, the apex or the pinnacle of translation in the world. So many don't know that in the KJV Bible, there's a translator's preface. So the translators, who again, we don't even know who all of them are, they still got together and they made a preface to this translation of the Bible. So in the original printing, in the original form that it was released in 1611, there's actually a whole section starting off where the translators write a bunch of stuff. Yet it's not like the king or some decree stepped in to remove it. No, it's these printers, these printing houses, these people who hold a monopoly in Anglo-dom over the printing presses have altogether quietly removed the preface. No KJV from anywhere you see or anyone you know contains this preface anymore. Printers have just removed it. In the same way they've removed 14 books out of the Old Testament, also quietly and silently. But I think there's a lot of people understand and debate the 14 books being removed, you know, like Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, that whole like Bible canon thing. But why would the translator's preface be removed? That's not something you really see people going into. And then further building on this too, no KJV Bibles printed today are even the original KJV. Many people don't know this either. All quote unquote KJV Bibles are actually the Oxford University edition revision, which came out, it's dated to 1769 by Oxford University's Benjamin Blaney. So your KJV Bible English edition is literally a revision over 100 years after the KJV by Oxford University, a guy they had, a Hebraist actually, ironically enough. But this is the basis for all KJV Bibles today. Nowhere is anyone told this, and people don't know this. People don't know any of this. But let's take a look at what the translators said. Because why might they want to censor the translators? Well, we've got some quotes here pulled from the translator's preface of the original 1611 KJV. And basically, I'm just going to take from an excerpt here. So from there, and obviously they're taking an Anglican Protestant position, they say the scriptures we say in those tongues, Greek of the New and Hebrew of the Old, being the tongues wherein God was pleased to speak to his church by his prophets and apostles. These are the two golden pipes, or rather only conduits, wherethrough the olive branches empty themselves into gold. St. Augustine, or St. Augustine, calleth them precedent or original tongues. St. Jerome, fountains. If truth be tried by these tongues, then whence a translation be made but out of them? The fountain is in the native tongues, the stream is in the translations. And again, this is a direct quotation from the preface. So what we have is the KJV in English being used as a basis to then translate from this English translation into all these other languages for a KJV received Bible today. Yet the translators of the KJV themselves declare a stance against doing this. They specifically say translations are to come from these two languages, the fountains, or rather the conduits, of where God really chose to speak to his prophets and apostles. And we've got another quote here. This really pertains to the choices of the KJV translators, because they themselves say here, if anything, and this is talking about and regarding their work, if anything is halting, superfluous, or not so agreeable to the original, well, the same may be corrected and the truth set in place. So they're telling you in the preface to the reader, if we made a mistake, if we messed up, if we make an error, and it becomes found out later, after the fact, feel free to go ahead and correct it. Don't hesitate to go and fix it. So yeah, they affirm this. They openly say this. Now, does these concessions make the translators and the overall MO, the modus operandi behind the KJV, these pious Christians who are great in all their intent and Christ-centric, Christ-aligned? No, because secular academics can give these concessions. Secular translators give these concessions. It's, you could say, honest or upright in their conduct. Sure, yeah. But let's take a look now at the actual original 1611 KJV. And here's where it gets weird, we'll say. So this is the engraving, the title or cover page of the official 1611 release. What you'll notice right off the rip, I mean, it actually, there's a lot going on here. It actually depends which you fixate on. I'll leave it up for a second, hold on. There's a there's a lot to take in here. I think I have more. Oh yeah, here we go. I was about to say I was waiting for okay. Notice the parallelism of the Masonic Temple or the Masonic Lodge and the depiction of the cover of the KJV original. Let's see, can I get my mouse pointer on screen? I can. So on the original engraving, notice the arrangement of the sun and the moon here, and how it mirrors the positioning overhead of the twin pillars, just like you have the twin arcs or arches here in the engraving of the original. Now in the Masonic Temple or the Lodge, these are the pillars of Boaz and Joachim, or Joachim, however you want to go about pronouncing it. And that's these arches really make up a correspondence to these pillars, sun and the moon cast above. And rather than the all-seeing eye, which is the permeation in masonry, this is sort of just swapped or replaced with the tetragrammaton, which is from the Protestant Reformation onward, the modern Hebraic name of God, or Hashem as they would call it in Judaism today. And this is in place of where in the lodge it's the all-seeing eye. Now, with this, I mean, we're just getting started. There's so much we can delve into. The symbolism is just prolific. Here, you'll notice in these little circles lining this ornamentation above the twin arches right here. These are the coats of arms for the 12 houses or 12 tribes of Israel in the Old Testament. And they're basically all summarized with a tent and then some form of symbol. And we're going to look some more into this, but notice too. No, we're changing this song. Hold on. Okay. Notice too that there's a form of altar, or it really, I'll skip over this. In the centerpiece, you have the actual title for the KJV. There's a few other things we'll get into. We'll look at a few more. Again, you have the eye. The correspondence here is all the same. All this Masonic imagery you can parallelingly trace and correspond with the cover of the KJV. I'll leave this up here for a second. I don't want to rant too much into it, but I do want y'all to be able to see the similarities here. Now, when we go to the bottom, and just hit a quick like 5-10 second skip back if you missed it, but at the bottom, there's the emblem, the logo of the Rosicrucian Order. Now, this is the Rose Cross or Red Cross Order. And how can I say that, or how do we have that? Well, look right here. This is the jewel of the 18th degree in the Masonic Scottish Rite. And just like in the bottom center on the KJV engraving, the title cover page, here we have the jewel of the 18th degree. It's the corresponding pelican with the infants, babies feeding. It's the same symbol. And you have other symbolic depictions here, all depicting the same thing. So there's a lot more to this type of Bible coming out than I think a lot of people want to let on or give credit to. And there's a lot being overlooked. But, you know, even the Freemasons themselves say it's important that the people come to an understanding of these types of things. So we read here, and this is from a Grand Master, a 33-degree Freemason. He says, "When the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. They shall then know truth, and more than that, they shall realize that from the beginning truth has been in the world, unrecognized." And it's pretty poetic when we just finish looking at what we were just looking at, I would say. So now to hone it back in, to tie it back into the original topic and to proceed forward with all of this in mind, back to the fundamentals, back to the basics. We have in the world, or in the realm of translation, in translating, you have what we call translation, you have transliteration, and anglicization. And we've covered this, I'm pretty sure, in every episode thus far, so far. We have theos, which is God, or theos. We have Zoe, which means life. And we have Kyrie, or Kyrie, which means Lord. Yeah, so think like, it's an example. Kyrie Irving, you know, NBA basketball. This, if we translate his name, literally means Lord Irving. Yeah. So we start to see when we approach the mainline English Bible translation tradition, which is really the groundwork is really laid by the KJV, we begin to see, once we can appreciate the Masonic lens that it comes to us through, along with its permeating influence really spanning the world to this point, we can very quickly begin to identify problems with traditional Christianity's beliefs, values, and ideas, in contrast with the decisions and choices that are being made by the translators. So here we've got a great example of this here. In the KJV version, we read in the rendering Isaiah, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground?" And so forth. Now notice it's capital L, Lucifer. Proper noun, proper name. A namesake for, is it a man, a deity? Well, we know it's a deity. And this is a big problem. So this is stemming from the modern Judaic and modern Masonic view of what's in ancient called Gnosticism or Gnosticism. And this is basically a divorcing from the Christian foundational element of what we would call monotheism, which is it's only God. It's the belief in one God. In Gnosticism, you have more than one God or more than one deity. And this is really groundwork material here in Isaiah, where the KJV dogmatizes and asserts a lesser deity or a lesser God in relation and within the realm of the God, the supreme God, being God the Father, or even the Trinitarian view, depending on who you talk to, right? But the invocation of Lucifer here, capital L and all, is the invocation of a Latin pagan deity, as if Isaiah's giving recognition to his existence and his activity manifests in reality. This is, again, the Gnostic dogma that Judaism and Freemasonry alike output. So think about how many, in Anglodom especially, how many English-speaking Christians you know that believe that Lucifer is just another name for the devil or Satan, or that Lucifer is Satan. Many people don't know that Lucifer is actually from the Latin pantheon. It's nothing to do with Isaiah or Christianity or anything of the sort, anything of the like. And we see the Septuagint, the Greek, being the oldest and the tradition that we really inherit above all the manuscripts. Ho Heosphoros, or Heosphoros. Common noun for one, not a deity, not the Latin god Lucifer. Okay, so this is a dogmatizing through the KJV that we receive now in English today. So fundamentally, to understand translation and how it works, you really need to understand from an architectural or engineering point of view the principles of what defines what makes a language system. Well, that's a bad way to put it. Language is a system. What makes a language, in its essence, a language, is really what you have to take as a starting point. Consider this an axiomatic, fundamental approach to even beginning any work in language. And with that being said, I'm really prefacing why I have this image here, and you're like totally irrelevant to reference a Sanskrit English dictionary. It's not the point. We're not about to diverge into Sanskrit. None of this has to do with Sanskrit. But I think it's worthy to appreciate graphs and charts like this. Because what can we observe if we treat it like from an engineering or architectural lens of approach? What can we learn about language through observing the evolution of the variations of alphabetical letters in their respective scripts? Well, you look at the Common English, okay, Archaic Roman. And so here's the thing, I don't even know if I would affirm his terminologies for the different languages. I'll get to the author here in a second, but notice above everything, there's an inversal of these letters in their respective scripts. So like the K in English, well, in Old Greek, and we've covered this in episode 1 and 2, it's literally what I would call an inversal. Okay, it's a 180-degree flippening. And that's because it's being written and read in the archaic and in the old sense from right to left, rather than the Koine Greek or Common Greek onward and to your modern European languages today, which is all left to right. You see? So in order to use the same alphabet in the same language from right to left, the letters have to be converted, flipped, a 180 done to them. But it's not only limited to that. And I think this is what many people miss, but I think is crucial to understand. It's not just limited to the left to right and right to left inversal or flippening between the two. You also have in every direction varying forms, depending on what language system you're looking at and studying and how far back you're trying to go in the history. So we take Phoenician, for example. Look at in this image the English A, the alpha, and then look at the Phoenician aleph, or also called alpha. It's not left to right or right to left, it's actually turned on its side. Now, that's not to say that there's this weird whole direction with Phoenician. It's just a nuance that's worthy of paying attention to. But what we do know and what we can say, we're about to get to this here in a second, is a major trend with right to left and left to right that we will notice as we start peering into it is up to down. So a vertical rather than horizontal rendering. So before we move on here, this is really I don't even want to give a take on Sanskrit in this episode. That it's really a whole episode in and of itself. It's this monopolized espousing, really like, okay, Britain created it basically when they were occupying India and like starving people. It's like they just came about and released all this literature during their occupation of India. And we have to make of it what we can. We have to really work with what we're being given here. But look at the physiognomy on this guy. I mean, it's just brutal. Like brutal. But yeah, so these are some callback images to what we have actually covered and looked at in the past in previous episodes. And this really gives you once again the visual representation of the right to left and left to right flippening that occurs in the evolution of written language systems throughout the ages over the aeons. So there's two things I want to introduce now that we've established all we have. And one is dealing with types of writing that we find historically, and the other is with vowels and vowel clustering. So the first one is bustrophodon or bustrophodon. Now, the OU still being there on the wiki is crazy. That's just wrong. The O needs to be dropped because it's literally a diphthong. And when we handle transliterating the OU diphthong from Greek, we drop the first vowel and keep the second one when it's the OU. So this should just be BUS, but that's besides the point. What I want to introduce here is it's not universally, even in the histories of the way language was written, it's not even universally left to right or right to left, like all throughout the manuscript or the inscription or whatever passage of writing you're looking at. There's actually variants within paragraphs, within a few sentences given at one time. So here in the wiki, they give a great example of it, showing you using English language in the Latin alphabet of ours. It says this is an example of text that has been written out in the Bustrophodon style, where lines are alternately written left to right and right to left. This is a way of writing that we have observed throughout history. Each line, it's like left to right, next line, right to left, and so on. So there's a large level of ambiguity in direction. It's only today that we have such a fixed and tunnel vision view of the directionality of language systems. This is very modern. This is very new. This is not how things used to be for a long time. So if we apply these things and we recognize that this is how ancient times worked, we're going to very quickly come to find lots of clues or lots of new information, okay? And I bring up the Matrix here, not to be cliche or like, what do you call it? What's the stereotype? I don't even know. But there's actually a very poetic thing that connects to what I'm explicating here with the imagery in the end of the first Matrix movie, where you have Neo awakes from being shot up, and then all of a sudden it's like he's illumined. He sees the code embedding the walls and the people. Well, pay attention to what's happening here. You have an up to down vertical rendering of alphabetical script, okay? This makes up the walls, the floor, even the people, the agents in front of them. Now, obviously it's not a real language or real letters, but in the illustrative sense, it really encapsulates the matrix within the matrix, okay? The language system at its essence is really what defines orderly arrangements for all things that are understood, that are perceived by us. And we're going to look at an example here of the metaphysical connotations that really come about when we start applying this looseness or ambiguity to language systems of ancient times. So, just to give a quick clarification, we did just show in the last slide a verse of Genesis. We're going to go back and elaborate on that, but it's important to clarify this verse that we're about to take a deeper look at. These are the sons of Judah. Judah is the first Judean, or the first Jew in the Old Testament. But it's very worthy to note that Judah and the Judeans are by no means, they are not the main characters, and they are not the protagonists of the Old Testament. So take your main figures that pretty much universally everyone's heard about: Moses, Isaac, Abraham, and etc. None of these figures are what we would call Judeans or Jews. None of them have relation of descending from Judah, because that's all a quote-unquote Jew, a Judean, is in the Bible: someone who descends from Judah, or who is citizen living within the nation, the kingdom of Judea. So in order to give an account for what I'm saying here, just so you don't think I'm just saying it, let's go ahead and expose where this ideology really comes from. So the recasting of the Judeans, or the Jews, as being, or from being the descendants of Judah, into now today being more mainstreamly understood as the Bible's main characters, figures, or center of the narrative, this actually only comes in from Judaism. This is only found in post-resurrection Judaism. So here we have the Talmud. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan said, actually, Mordecai came from the tribe of Benjamin. Why was Mordecai called a Judean in the book of Esther if he was from the tribe of Benjamin? Rav Yehuda, or Rav Judah, said in the name of Rav, because he repudiated idolatry. And anyone who repudiates idolatry is called a Judean, or is called a Jew, as it is written in Daniel 3:12. And he proceeds to exegete the Masoretic of Daniel 3:12 here. And then we see Rabbi Yochanan said, from this we learn that even those from the other tribes who reject idolatry are also called Judeans, or Jews. Okay, so this is a Talmudic flippening or switch away from that of the Bible. So if you just read the Bible in the Old Testament, there's Jacob and the 12 sons. One of these sons is Judah. Judah gives way as the house or tribe of Judah, and from him come the Judeans, or the, quote, Jews. It's the Talmud where all the houses, all the tribes of Israel become enveloped or grouped together into oneness with Judah and Judea, the Judeans, the Jews. And this is the source for it. It's right here in the Talmud. But anyway, to get the linguistic point across for the invocation of this verse, we're going to look at Genesis 46:12 from the Septuagint. And the sons born of Pharez, these were Esrom and Yemuel, or Jemuel. Now you'll notice very quickly, if we remember Boustrophedon, the way that it was ambiguous, really, how these languages could be written, read, spoken, and treated directionally on manuscript. Well, if we read these names as they appear left to right, right to left, these two specifically, it's very interesting. We do a right to left flippening of Pharez and we get Seraph. We do a right to left flippening of Esrom and we get Morse. Seraph, let's look at it. Flip the name Pharez, who's the son descendant of Judah, you get Seraph. And then the plural, the Hebraic plural, would be Seraphim, name for divine heavenly beings. And here we have some older iconography of them. They're very mysterious from the Old Testament, definitely. But they're angelic, divine, heavenly beings, the seraphs, or the seraphim. Inverted is the spelling for one of the descendants of Judah, likewise. Now, for Esrom, we have Morse. Now, what's the relevance of this? Well, you ever heard of Morse code? And this is where it gets strange, like the parallels that once you start engaging like this and applying these linguistic realities to the way you approach reading literature, it just gets weird. Like, you come across a story like this. Morse code, dated to be invented in 1837. Samuel Morse, inventor of Morse code. Well, again, this is Esrom, the descendant or son of Judah, just flipped. Now, Morse code in and of itself is an encoding or a hiding and veiling, a language system for encoding, for hiding, and for veiling the true meaning or the intended meaning into a coded or hidden, a veiled representation. Now, Morse invented this, we are told, together with Alfred Vail. So Samuel Esrom flipped now to Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail invent Morse code, which is the telegraphing system first of its kind intended to veil, hide, or obscure real meanings within. And it's just like, when you think about it, the likelihood that this is a real story of two real people with these real names coming together to do this real thing, it seems much more allegorical of a story through this perspective, through this lens. Very much an allegorical framing of the history rather than a literal. Now, is that me saying these two men didn't exist, or am I running down a conspiratorial rabbit hole? Absolutely not. I'm not saying either way. They could have not. But the framing here is absolutely poetic. It's absolutely allegory encoded. And there's no denying that. I mean, we're seeing it right in front of us. But anyway, to continue with English Bible tradition, it's not only the KJV, but it's actually all English translations historically, as well as English translators in the field. They've all used a degree of interpretation of their own to a great extent. And they all use a quiet but discretionary opinion. And we're going to look at the word angel to give an account for this, to give an example that demonstrates this. So if you'll remember from the previous episode, I threw this slide up and then I was just like, yeah, no, I don't want to get into this right now, not the point. We'll come back to it. Now we're going to come back to it. So I did this breakdown for last episode because we were talking about Tartary or Tartarus. Now we're going to look at it from the translational sense. Okay, how do we go about rendering these words, making this verse coherent? And you saw my translation of it, but how do English translators approach it? Well, we've got two examples side by side using the same Greek word, looking at how the same Greek word is handled. So, in 2 Peter 2:4, the Greek word agalon, or transliterated angelon, is preserved in pretty much any English translation you're going to read. 2 Peter 2:4, but specifically here, the KJV translators preserve it. They transliterate and anglicize it. Yet, the same KJV translators in Luke 7:24, same Greek word, angelon, they translate this word. So you'll notice with the KJV, this sleight of hand choice they make, this binary of what they choose from and don't choose from. Here in Luke 7:24, KJV translators said, oh, we're going to translate angels here. And then in 2 Peter 2:4, they go, oh, we're going to keep the word angels from Greek preserved here. But then in 2 Peter 2:4, and this is all too pervading a trend, they actually omit, they blot out entirely the word Tartaros, and they replace this word with hell. So two sleight of hands being done here. And again, this is just the beginning. I'm just showing you really a peep into the window of how these things really work and how people are giving us the Bible in English language. That's pretty much it. This is the end of part one. Gonna have part two up next.